Over the years, I've organized a retail tour or two, showing off notable retail in cities like New York, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and I know how challenging it is to organize and lead what is often called a retail safari. Now, my guest today has led many retail safaris around the world, and today he's going to lead us on a virtual retail safari. Today, we're talking with Ian Scott. You're listening to Where We Buy. It's the show where we talk with retail experts and we visit the places where we buy. My name is James Cook. I research retail and real estate for JLL. Welcome, Ian.
Hi, James. Thank you for having me on the podcast. I'm looking forward to this.
Are you ready to take us around the world to visit cool retail places? I know I'm excited about this.
Yes, bags are packed, passports at the ready.
So you just came back from NRF, right? You did a bunch of retail tours in New York. How was that?
I always love coming to New York. Unsurprisingly, it's one of the best cities for looking at exciting and new retail. It was a pretty hectic schedule for me. I did 6 retail safaris in 4 days.
That's nuts.
So I spent most of my time walking the streets of Soho rather than walking around the Javits Center looking at all the booths.
When you're organizing a retail safari, what are the clients after? Like, do they just want to learn new stuff, or do they give you more specific instructions? Like, how does that work?
I normally get 2 different briefs. One of them is just show me and my guests cool shops,
Right.
Which is quite nice because I can just run riot and find all the stuff that I find interesting. And then sometimes there'll be a specific brief. I often find with brands and retailers, they'll be saying, well, we're working on a project. We're looking at this. Can we see examples? Or it could be a technology company where they may want to showcase specific types of technology. So it's a mix. I'd say 2/3 people are like, just show us cool stores. And I think that's really nice because I always try and mix it up anyway, even if there is a specific brief, because on the way, you're going to walk past an amazing store that you can showcase. And always I try and show a broader range of things beyond a brief as well, because it gives context to the broader elements and benefits of physical store that some people on the tour may not have considered before.
I find too, like if for example, if it's a retailer and I'm taking them to some new spot, I think it's more fun to not take them to a competitor or take them to something
absolutely.
That's outside of their space for them to get inspired by something different, you know?
Oh, definitely. And it's interesting you said that. I took one of the biggest toy brands on a safari a few years ago in London, and they said, I can't wait to visit Hamley's toy store. And I said, I'm not taking you to Hamley's. But first of all, you kind of should know what's going on in Hamley's already. But also, I actually say, forget the category. I'm not showing you the products on the shelf. I'm showing you a great window. I'm showing you great staff. I'm showing sustainability, integrating technology. And the product they're selling is not the focus that I have. I mean, sometimes people specifically say, we're a grocer. Can we see some grocery stores? And I include it, but I will always add other things because you will find inspiration in another category on a solution that is like completely standard and expected in their category. It could be revolutionary in yours. So I say, if you're doing a tour for inspiration, if you just look at your competitors, that's not inspiration because all you're doing is copying them. So if you want to try new things, if you're a grocery store, we'll go in a sneaker store or we'll go in an electronics retailer and see these amazing things that you can apply in your sector as well. So I deliberately broaden the horizons to surprise and delight people.
What's the best retail city that you've been to? I was like, it's got to be New York. And then I was like, wait. No, it's got to be London. And I'm like, wait, no, it's Shanghai. Like, do you have a sense, or are they all good?
I mean, there are a pocket of big cities. I mean, New York and London are obvious. One that really surprised and delighted me was Paris last year. I did a tour in September for part of the NRF Europe show. And I hadn't been for 3 years to properly analyze. And that blew my mind, the quality and standard of stores there. Then I love Copenhagen. But I agree, I mean, Asia is driving retail innovation. They're embracing of new ideas, but also technology integration is well in advance. And I often say to Europeans and Americans, you know, you don't need a crystal ball to see what you should be doing in 3 years. Go to Shanghai, Tokyo, and Seoul, and you'll see what will come through. And I think one of the key reasons they're so innovative is not so much the technology, it's the fact that customers will embrace a new idea way more quickly.
Yes.
And with greater interest in Asia than they will in Europe. You know, I was in Shanghai in 2019 and I was posting some of the things I saw, like a Bluetooth shopping trolley where you put a strap around your wrist and the trolley follows you. And I posted it, and Europeans and Americans were going, oh, that won't work. That'll crash. And I was aware in the West, we come up with reasons why it will fail, whereas Asia's just getting on with using it. And that drives the development. So I think it's mindset of customers that really differentiate the drive of innovation in Asia, because they will take a new idea and run with it. So it allows them to then move on to the next idea more quickly.
Ian, I feel like I could talk with you about this stuff all day, but we need to get to our tour. So we're going to do multiple different cities, right? Where are you taking us first?
We are. I like the brief of, 5 or 6 really interesting stores, and I picked some from different cities and different regions, but also different types of stores, just to showcase really some of the cool things that are happening in physical retail. So what I wanted you to do was start with, first of all, London, and it's a store called Fanatics, which is the sports collectible market, which is very well established in the US. But Fanatics, interestingly, chose London to create their first dedicated standalone permanent store. And it's a fascinating space, as much as how people use it as how it's designed. And I know their retail director, and I also know the creative director of the agency that designed it. And they spent 2 hours showing me around. And there is so much in there that's aimed at letting people use the space in different ways. And we have a lot of people talking about retail theatre and experience as a key benefit of physical space. And they do it here. You have this sort of breakout area. One of the top former EPL players, Rio Ferdinand, does a podcast, and he did an episode here when it first opened. There'll be live streaming sort of sports games. It's a place to just come and hang out, which I think is really cool. And across the store, they have a whole range of different products on display, by subcategorized by different types of sports. So you can have NFL, Champions League, hockey, all sorts of things. Formula One's a very popular one as well, displayed in different ways depending on the value of the different offer that they have. So the high value stuff is locked away. The lower value stuff's more accessible on the shelf. So I like that tiering of premiumization as well. You have this crazy situation where people come in and they open these packs of cards, and they have these special tables that are dedicated. And the first time I came in, they even have little stands to put your phone on, so you can live stream yourself opening cards. And I watch people like screaming down their phone because they've got a valuable card. And you can see her on the right there, but the value of some of these cards is crazy. This is a Tom Brady card, which is a limited edition version in great condition. There's a whole hierarchy of rating these. £6,500, which is what, $7,500, $8,000. So you find that the values go really high. People turn up with a briefcase handcuffed to their wrist, and there's a valuation. And you can go there, and there's an accredited valuer will sit there and calculate the value of your collection. I've never seen anything like it. And this young lad, it was just so cool. He was in the store getting so excited, and he's just starting as an influencer. So Simon Rosenberg, the retail director at Fanatics, let him go into this room, which is a live streaming podcast room. And he was able to live stream opening his cards. And there are cameras all around. There's an overhead view camera, so you can look down on the table side and front ones. And it's perfectly done. And in the window as well. So people walking by can watch and experience and then come inside to learn more as well. It's a brilliantly designed store, absolutely tailored to this market. And it's crazy watching how excited these collectors get when they're in the store and looking around.
This is so interesting because this is something that kind of grew up online, like web culture, is people filming videos of themselves opening packs of collectibles and then saying, oh, wow, this one is, they saw what their fans were doing. and said, we need to incorporate that into the store design. That's really brilliant.
It is. It's absolutely understanding the audience. And I wasn't familiar with it, but watching people in the store, you know, when they're so excited about live streaming, opening a pack, and people will crowd round to watch the openings. And you can pick out a card worth tens of thousands of dollars, you know, from a pack you spent $20 buying. It's so you get that sense of excitement, anticipation, and reveal, which you can't replicate in a grocery store or a fashion store. You know, it's that fan engagement. And they're serious fans. You know, you've got people here who spend a whole lifetime collecting the cards and the memorabilia, and that emotional connection is way stronger than sort of typical retail as well.
Okay, where are we headed to next?
Next, we're off to Broadway in New York to Buck Mason. And I visited this store in October when I was researching a safari. And a friend of mine who helps me and does tours as well, Jack Stratton, said, you need to come and see this store. And he described it to me. It's all wood, and you got these features. And I was like, yeah, okay, that sounds pretty cool. But I've never seen a store that collects so many different elements and combines them in a way that just works. I call it a 1 + 1 = 3, you know, greater than the sum of its parts. And you come into this store and you can see everything is clad in wood. And it has that almost Scandinavian feel, though it's an American wood interpretation of a Scandinavian style. Long, thin store. There's a cafe right by the entrance where you can sit down. Cafes are not unique, but there's just works and fits in really, really well. And you see in this middle image here, you have this whole wall of books, and they actually sell the books. So they're beautiful, what I call coffee table type books, collectible books. And also what I really love is they're displayed like they would be in your house. It's not all neatly stacked in a perfect order. It looks like someone's browsed and pulled one out and then shoved it back in again. So it feels homely, and you have this understated lighting. And then you go upstairs and it sort of transforms further. It feels almost like you're in your own home. You have these seats and books, and people sit there with their laptops open, doing work and chilling out and relaxing. And the staff they're like the perfect embodiment of the brand. They're all the type of people you'd expect, having walked around the store and got a feel for it. I mean, on the right here, it's fascinating. They actually have some drinks. There's like collections of whiskey and gin. And apparently, if you buy a product, you're invited to have a shot with them if you want to, which is fabulous to see. And I have a friend who was a senior loss management director at a big retailer, and he was having a meltdown going, all this alcohol on a shelf and it's not secured. And you can just see in the middle picture there, and you can also see on the right, they have a turntable both upstairs and downstairs with beautiful old valve amplifiers for anyone who's old enough to remember a valve amplifier, and this huge collection of vinyl records. And you see people just sat cross-legged on the floor flicking through the vinyls, and you can request to have your choice played. But what I do love is that the staff will curate different types of music on different days of the week. So I went in on a Saturday, and it was ABBA and Tina Turner. It was like a 70s disco. And then I went back in on the Sunday, and it was Marvin Gaye, and it was cool. I think you can actually see the Marvin Gaye image on the right. And they said, so people will request, but if we're setting a mood in one way, we'll politely decline if it's the wrong mood. But people sit there for hours just flicking through books and vinyl records. But the whole place is just beautifully curated. And you sort of see this sofa area and people just chilling out. I love those old 1970s loudspeakers. They said that I think they found them on eBay, that huge, massive freestanding speakers. I mean, nowadays speakers sit in the palm of your hand, but this whole sense of occasion around this store is just, you feel your blood pressure drop and calming, and it feels like you're home. And then the product is also beautifully curated. I was in there on a Saturday afternoon in the pouring rain, and there were about 400 people in this store. And I assume not all of them were just trying to get out of the rain. And they said that the levels on a Saturday are absolutely crazy because it's such a lovely place to hang out. So it's all those components that you imagine retailers discussing in their boardroom and their design sessions. But Buck Mason have put them all together so cohesively. It's an amazing store.
Not that long ago, I was at the Buck Mason on Congress in Austin, Texas. And I was staying right nearby, and I walked in, and you talk about being the target demographic. They had what was it? It was the Bob Dylan album, Blonde on Blonde on the turntable.
Yeah.
There was like, I think
Brilliant.
there was like some sage burning. I felt like I'd walked into Laurel
Yes.
Canyon in LA in like the mid 70s. I was like, oh, this is cool.
Yeah, they have this wood, and it's a naturally scented wood, and they just light it a little
Oh,
bit.
that's
and
what
let
it is. Okay.
Yeah, I can't. They told me the name of the wood. I can't remember, but it creates this beautiful scent. And what I like is you can apply all of the senses in physical retail that you can't do digitally. Taste is very specific to the food and beverage market, but these guys have sound with the music, and then smell with the burning wood, as well as the touch and feel and the, that sort of ambiance that you normally have. So they really play into senses, and particularly as things like listening to music and scent have higher recall than a product you see. So they're tapping into senses that will create a subliminal, embedded recall of the experience, which is wonderful as well.
Did this one you say had a coffee shop, or it was a coffee shop next
It
door?
it does, right
Yeah.
by the entrance, as well. A beautiful coffee, and it's just really nicely done. My friend Jack, who does the store tours with me, he went in and out 4 or 5 times, and the guy in the coffee shop got to know him. Well, just literally handed him a free coffee every time he came in, because he was bringing 20 people in to look at the store. I missed that, but it's just another typical thing where they just recognize, engagement, and they acknowledge it really nicely as well.
Okay, well, where are we headed to next?
So next is a beautiful little store called Larfeuille, which is in Paris. Now, this is the sort of thing that you find when you're on the way somewhere else. Just around the corner is an amazing store called Merci, which is very well known in Paris. It's a beautiful store. And after I visited it, I walked around the corner to walk down this street to go somewhere. And I walked past this front and I went, oh, that looks interesting. And I walked back to take a look, and I popped in because I was researching a safari. And I chatted to this guy, and I'm ashamed to say I've forgotten his name, but he's the owner. He used to work at Hermes and some other beautiful luxury houses. And he just sat there chatting to me while making a bag, talking about the process of how they source this beautiful leather from Italy, the same place that Hermes sort of sourced their leather. And he designs his bags so you can make them all within one day. And he's making them at the back of the store. You can see it's a tiny store. It's about the size of a garage. But inside, it's just beautifully done. All the rolls of the leather on display. Now, there are a lot of companies that will create and fabricate this sort of artisanal feel. But because this is actually his workshop as well, there's huge function here as well. He will literally walk into the store, pick up a roll of that leather, and make a product from it. So it's not just window dressing. And he had his little workshop there with the sketches and all the tools. And there's no show. He's not showing it off. He's just functionally going, the cost of property is so high in Paris. It's wonderful that I can both make on site and then also showcase and sell on site. So there's a pragmatism to what he's doing here. And the store is gorgeous. The products are really nice. And they're quite reasonably priced. They're €600 to €800, $600 to $800. So not cheap. But having come from the Hermes sort of market, they're a lot more affordable than his former employer. And it's just one of those delights. And it's one of the examples that I often give this store is walk around a city, even if you know it well. I'm in London every week looking at stores. I always find something new that I don't know on the way to the place that's on my target list. And this is what I love. And all the way along this street, there were just beautiful independent stores doing cool things. And this was just the one that I happened to showcase. I could have showcased 2 or 3 other ones that were as equally appealing. And I love these little independent stores. What you will often find from a design point of view is they'll be beautifully curated, but they're not hampered by the traditional design rules of retail. They will try different things. So the creativity is often broader than big chains of stores where they're confined with shareholder returns and a whole load of focus groups and research. This guy went, I want my store to look like this. And he did it, and that to me is so refreshing when you come across independent retailers.
What it makes me think of is so often you'll go to a flagship store where they'll put in some kind of element of the store that's made to feel like there's an artisanal thing. Like, I don't know, it could be a jeans shop where you could get a special design embroidered. And so often those areas of the shop aren't really active most of the time. It was kind of more for
No.
show. And this is for
Yes.
real. Like they're making it on site. That's very cool.
It is. I know what you mean. Those spaces I often call Santa's Grotto. And if they're not authentic, they're cheesy. You know what I mean? They're cheesy. And all you do is you give up selling space for a very expensive feature that doesn't add value. It's like whenever I go into Home Depot type stores, every once in a while, they'll suddenly have a creative area and there'll be a big work desk with seats and there'll be mood books out on the table. And no one uses it. You know, a few people like me take a photo to stick on social media, and then you go back 6 months later and there's racks selling product that have replaced it. You know, it's got to be relevant. And here it absolutely is, because this is a working space as well as a selling space.
I love it. And what was the name again of this one?
Larfeuille.
Larfeuille.
I don't know if it's the founder's name. I think it may be, but he's a lovely guy. And if you're ever in Paris and you go in the store, he will welcome you and happily chat and show you how he makes the bags as well, which is really nice.
I love it. So where's our next stop? Are we sticking to Europe?
Okay. We're back to London, and we have another glorious little store, Ffern with 2 Fs, are being a very successful online fragrance brand. And they create one unisex fragrance every quarter. And I always find it fascinating how a fragrance brand can do so well online when it's all about the smell, which you can't showcase online. But they have this beautiful store in Soho, London, not to be mixed up with Soho, New York. Tiny frontage. And what I do love, this window, if you turn up early in the morning, catch it right on a sunny day, the light comes through that Georgian window, runs right across the store. But it feels like you're in a cottage. And they have these beautifully curated displays, handwritten notes and comments. And then they have this gorgeous diffuser in the corner, and it normally has the latest fragrance. And it just drips onto that little clay sort of bowl underneath. So you get the natural aroma, which makes sense. They're selling the aroma. You see these little handwritten signs. They tell stories. It's not functional. It's not, this bowl is $10. You know, they actually talk about the process. And storytelling is such a powerful tool. You know, 65% of human conversation is storytelling and gossip, probably more these days. And when you tell a story, there's an emotional connection to what you're saying because it's not functional. You create that connection, you're more likely to remember, you're more likely to tell other people. So in our everyday lives, we do it all the time. And then you suddenly get into a store, and particularly if you think about how laptops are sold in electronic stores, it's just a list of features, tiny, tiny font that you can barely read with a load of acronyms and abbreviations that the layman doesn't understand. And there's nothing about why it's useful or what it means to you. This is the opposite. This is all about connection and meaning. And then at the rear of the store, you step down into this little space, and it just has a collection of all of their products. And on the table, you have the latest one, you have some descriptions. And if you can just see there on the left, you know, the text, there's quite a bit of information, but they're using bold and sort of fine text to highlight and differentiate. And then you have this gorgeous illuminated shelf feature running all the way around the space as well. And you just come out with a big smile on your face. It's one of those experiences where you really feel like you connect with the brand, and the storytelling, you know, just takes it a step further as well.
The handwritten note that you showed next to the bowl showing the story and the history of it, there's so many things I like about it. First of all, that it's truly handwritten, and that means it's a little bit difficult to read. So you really
Yes.
it's, you know, cursive, and so it feels organic and human and in no way corporate. And it's telling a story that's right in line, this handcraftedness. Very cool.
Yes. I'll read out what it says. The handwritten note says, hand-built 10 bowls by Joe Wahlberg, modern potter. Hand building is a slow process. Each 10 bowl took almost 2 hours to make and was gently formed in the hand before being refined with a simple rib tool. Due to the hand-built nature, each holds a difference of its own. Of its own. Yeah, sorry. It is very much a scripty handwriting. But you sort of get rewarded by leaning in and taking the effort to read. And it's going to be a descriptive, illuminating story around the product as well, which is what I love.
It's so funny too. In retail, we're always talking about, we got to take away the friction. It's got to be a frictionless retail experience. Yes. But this, it forces you to slow down, and that friction is part of the joy.
Yes. It is. Sometimes friction is really, really beneficial. You go into grocery and friction is intolerable. I always joke that grocery is the only category you have to shop, because if you don't eat, you die. So a lot of the times the shopping is a necessary evil. And I always say check out in grocery. It's you cannot make it hard for customers to give you money, and that applies in any retail environment, but particularly grocery. Whereas you come in here, and the dwell time must be 10 times bigger than going to buy a pair of jeans somewhere, because you want to explore. The staff are enthusiastic and well-trained and knowledgeable on the product. And you just want to discover the brand and learn and try different things. So, it's a delightful space. The only challenge for me on the store tour is you can get about 10 people in here. So for big groups, it's just not possible to come in, which is such a shame, because it's towards the top of my list whenever I'm doing a tour in London.
Okay, where are we heading to next?
So next we're going to Singapore. I've been fortunate to do 2 tours in Singapore in the last couple of years, again associated with the NRF Asia show. And I was walking along Orchard Road, which is Singapore's equivalent of Oxford Street or Fifth Avenue or the Champs-Élysées. And I discovered this store, DORS, and it's Design Orchard Retail Singapore. And I was astonished to talk to people in the store and understand what this is. This is a showcase for startup brands, people who are just getting into fashion, homeware, and accessories. And this is part funded by the Singapore Fashion Council and part by the government as well. And upstairs in the building, there are workshops and an auditorium where people can come along, present, and actually physically make products. And then they have this really professional looking shop space, and they can rent, a couple of rails or an area in the space, and even little sort of pop-up spaces at the back like this, at very affordable prices, because Singapore retail is very expensive. And I was trying to imagine, say in the UK or in the US, where you would have this sort of startup brand thing. It would never be on Fifth Avenue, but they're showcasing these startup brands on the premium, most expensive, highest profile street in Singapore, and arguably one of the top 3 or 4 in the whole of Asia. So I've never seen this before. That investment in helping emerging talent get a foothold in the retail sector, to me, was incredible to see, especially when I had a chance to look upstairs and see the full support resources. There's rooms full of sewing machines and desks and things like that up there that allow startup businesses to sort of make their mark in the physical retail space.
It kind of feels like each designer or brand kind of has control of the design of their own little selling area. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I saw some consistency in some of the fixturing. You can see right through this space. This isn't a display for just one brand. There are several. So I think, but around the store, you were seeing different furniture designs, display products. So I think there's a selection of racking, rails, and display plinths they can choose from. But I think there's a cost matrix. You can have one rail, you could have, a whole corner of the store, depending on your investment levels. And then they actually advertise this. When I came back in, I think it was June when I was there, I saw it in 2024, and I was desperate to show it 2025. And I turned it to do my research, and it was closed for a refit, and I was gutted. And then the day before my tour, it reopened. So I was able to come back in again, because to me, it's just such a unique proposition. The store itself is really nice. I wouldn't, as a store designer, I wouldn't have chosen it for my 5 or 6 for the podcast, but the offer makes it such a wonderful example of how you can utilize physical retail for good.
What's up next?
Right, we're back to London. And this was a really interesting project. This was about 4 years ago, and this is Patagonia, who we know take a very strong sustainable stance. They famously closed their shops and stopped selling on Black Friday a few years ago. And even in their stores now, there are a lot of activities. And they're heavily involved in a lot of ethical and sustainable campaigns and support a lot of companies. So this is in North London, not in the main city centre, a couple of miles north. And they opened this Action Works Cafe as a pop-up. And the branding is really low. You see, it's not plastered with Patagonia everywhere. There's a little sign at the start as you come in, Patagonia Action Works. But this is a cafe where you can come in and have a drink, and then you can learn all about the campaigns and the charities and the action groups that Patagonia support. And you can learn, and there are a couple of people from Patagonia and some of the groups there. So while you have your coffee, and the money for the coffee goes towards these groups as well, you can then sign up as well if you want. So it's like a huge recruitment drive for all of the campaign groups that Patagonia supports. And again, I thought it was just such an unusual approach to using a physical space, because they toned down their own branding. And you would have thought a lot of brands would leverage their brand because that's a point of connection to the causes, but they toned that down completely. And they picked a point where, I had to travel for about 20 minutes out of the central London to get here to see it and experience it. And I had a good long chat with their marketing manager. And it was fascinating to see how they did that. Their different talks from some of the different groups as well. You could take away information, you could sign up or donate there on the spot as well. And to me, that's one of those wonderful processes that a brand can invest in supporting good causes in a way that's very different. You can stick a page on your website, you can put a display in your window, and I'm not decrying those. They're both very good things. But this is sort of taking it to another level, I think.
It's interesting. So the brand Patagonia is very well aligned with sustainability, the environment. Yeah. So this is so on brand for them. What do you think about, because a lot of times I hear brands being advised to stay out of politics, stay out of, because you're going to alienate some percentage of your customer. Is your take only do it if it really truly aligns with who you are as a brand, or what's your thought?
I think the challenge is authenticity. So you'll have brands like Patagonia, Lush are another one, where you feel they were started as a business based on those principles. You have a lot of brands that have now embraced them. I'm not being cynical, because they're good things to embrace. And if you believe in it, it's a good thing to do. But when it feels like a marketing campaign for the brand, I think it falls flat. Patagonia, you believe that they believe in this. You go around their stores and the messaging is there, and they're not just banging the drum about, save the whales, but even when they're talking about what they do as a brand, how they live their lives as a brand, it makes sense. And Lush is another one that I hugely admire in this area. I mean, for example, Lush has not been on social media for several years. They were concerned about the impact on mental health of a lot of the younger generations. So there is no Instagram account or YouTube account or TikTok account for Lush, and it made zero impact on their business. They still get coverage because their customers post about. But it's interesting because it's almost marketing suicide to cut off social, particularly when social is the starting point for 70% of health and beauty shopping journeys. But they said, no, we're doing it. And they've stayed doing it. It's not a 1 month thing to raise profile and then sneak back in again. And you see this with Patagonia as well. They walk the walk. So my feeling is, if you're going to do it, you've got to properly believe in it. And it can't be just a social media post. You've got to live and breathe and demonstrate that you really mean what you say. And you do see a few brands sort of their voice goes a bit quiet after a while, because maybe the return on investment wasn't in the same quarter, so the shareholders are a little bit upset about it, or whatever. And I always think that's sad, because it's kind of doing the right thing. I mean, Patagonia take quite an extreme. They support some groups that may push the envelope a little bit, that would make some people uncomfortable, but they believe in it, so they push it through, even though it may potentially harm potential sales, because it might alienate some of their potential audience as well. But they will stand by the principles, and that's when you really see a brand means it.
I lost track. Do we have more to come?
I think that might, that's the last one. So that's six different stores that do things in slightly different ways. So hopefully it shows a little bit of a cross section of the. It's more not loads of cool design, but it's cool ways that people are using the physical space was the approach I took here.
Are there any big takeaways we can take from our virtual retail tour? Some suggestions we might give to future store designers?
Yes, I would, first of all, go and look at everything. I always say we're so lucky in retail. If you want to research retail, just walk down the high street. I often joke, if we were making nuclear submarines, you wouldn't have a clue what your competitors are doing. You wouldn't be able to seek that inspiration. But with retail, you walk down there, and as we discussed at the start, don't just look at your own sector. You will see amazing things in other sectors. So go and have a look, get curious, talk to the store staff. Store staff are amazing. They are the living, breathing embodiment of the brand. They will tell you what works in the store and what doesn't, and what they'd like to see improved and what customers complain about. So if you're designing a store and you want to get a feel, a store manager or a store colleague will talk about something you notice in their store, and they will talk about how it works or how it doesn't work. So I often say, research and insight is so much easier in retail than most categories because it's all laid out there with public access. Be curious, but also the physical space, it took a battering during COVID, and we had a lot of naysayers saying physical retail is dead. And I've seen statistics that show it didn't. It just paused, and we waited for it to come back, and it's back up at the levels it is. It's still 75% of global retail sales. So when people say, oh, physical stores are all about experience now, I'll go, by all means, experience is a differentiator, but you still got to sell stuff in your store, because it's your biggest sales channel and probably always will be. It's three times bigger than all of the digital channels combined. Despite the onslaught of technology and the growth of social media, we still like to go into shops, touch and feel things. And there are three unique aspects of a physical store that I often say. You can touch and feel the product, which is useful when trying on clothes or sitting on a sofa or picking fresh fruit. You can also see everything. If you go online, it's a very linear shopping journey. You go on the Nike website and you look at the Air Max sneaker and you see the Air Max sneaker. You go into the Nike store and you see everything. So you come in for some Air Max sneakers and you come out with a running suit and a football kit and a bag because you can see it. And humans are like magpies, we like shiny new things. So showing people more allows you to sell more, which you can't do online. And then the third one is that interaction face to face with another human being. And it's another thing that COVID taught us was we are social creatures. And we saw the impact of being denied that social interaction for a couple of years. So the ability for someone to talk to you and smile and say hello and comment on what you're wearing and discuss what you want to look at and educate you so you make a purchase, again, is unique and physical. So anyone looking to design a store, consider the touch and feel, the ability to show everything, and the interaction with humans, because they're the points of difference in a store that will allow the store to maximize its impact.
So Ian, if folks want to learn more about you, and you do more than just retail safaris, what's your website? How can they check you out?
Probably the best place to connect with me and also understand what I do is on LinkedIn. It's Ian Scott Retail Consulting. I'm the crazy one in the flowery shirts who keeps talking about shops and complaining about rail and air travel, which is what I seem to talk about more these days. So yeah, LinkedIn, I'm constantly visiting stores and I post about the stores so you can see the stores and understand my attitude and thoughts on them as well.
Thank you so much for joining me today. This has been a great conversation and a wonderful global retail tour.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me. It's always lovely to have an opportunity to talk about cool stores. So thank you.
And if you like this podcast, do me a favor and go into the app that you're listening or watching and give us a rating or a review. Especially if you're feeling generous, write something nice that you like about the show. You can subscribe to Where We Buy on the iPhone podcast app or on Spotify. Wherever you listen to podcasts, just search for Where We Buy. And if you've got a specific question about retail, shopping centers, or retail real estate, feel free to connect and message with me on LinkedIn. Just search for James Cook, JLL. There are a million James Cooks out there, but as far as I know, I'm the only one right now at JLL. And our theme music is Run in the Night by the good lords under Creative Commons license. All right, that's a wrap.